Tonight's guest, Katherine Ramsland, has written many true crime stories. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of her books, Cemetery Stories, Haunted Graveyards, Embalming Secrets, and the Life of a Corpse After Death. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope you said great, because I'm doing great. Again, I'm loving the weather. Nice and cool now. Nice and cool. I like it. Hopefully it stays this way. I think we're going to hit one day of 90 next week, and that's it. I think Sacramento was on the lowdown. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts. Try to get the right position here. California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state of California, which means we can help you. We can get to you from anywhere in the state. Isn't that cool? And we also can get to you if you live in Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and even Hawaii. Parts of Hawaii. Not all of Hawaii. I wish it was all of Hawaii. But anyway, we got a great show for you tonight. This woman, our good friend Katherine Ramsland, was on last week, and we had technical difficulties, and I'm hoping this week's a little different. And I'm just giving you guys a heads up that if we do start to have difficulties, what I'm going to do is we're just going to switch it off to phone, so we're going to have to do a dial-up, if something goes wrong. So I just want to give you guys an FYI on that. But I'm all prepared for that. And hopefully this week's goes different, because there was a lot going on last week and people were online, so sometimes, I have Comcast and, Xfinity, and my whole neighborhood seems to have Xfinity. So when big events happen, there's a big drain on the internet here. So these things happen frequently, more frequent than I like. My guest tonight, Katherine Ramsland, is an excellent writer. I'm a big Anne Rule fan, and Katherine writes books in that vein, and I love her books. I love everything she writes, and I've read almost everything she's written. I'm really excited to bring this book. This book she wrote quite a while ago about cemeteries and stuff, and I'm real excited about it. And I even have notes. See, I took notes of my book. So we'll be talking to her about that. In the meantime, if you're watching from Facebook and you like what you hear, please hit that follow button. If you're watching from, where else? Oh, YouTube. There's a little guy down in the bottom right-hand corner here. See, there we go. There's the button. Okay. Right there. I hope I'm pointing in the right place, because everything's like opposite, backwards. It's like I get used, like, give you an idea. This is the right side of my face, and I see it as left side of my face. So that tells you how I'm trying to figure it out. So maybe it's over here, right? Oh, anyway, you'll find it. You can see him. It's a little ghost with a magnifying glass on and a Sherlock Holmes hat. That's our mascot. That's how you subscribe to our YouTube page. We've got almost 400 videos over there, and I think you'll find something that you like, because we cover different topics. We just don't cover ghostly things. We cover all kinds of stuff. So I think you'll find something that you like. I'm going to boost my meta gain here a little bit. All right, that's better. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get our guest in. And then, like I said, we may have to switch to doing it by phone. I'm hoping we don't. I'm hoping everything goes smoothly this week. And let's do this. Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me right? Hi. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right?
No, it's garbled. I'm gonna go ahead and call you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So here we go. We're gonna call. Yeah, I'm gonna take you off camera. I'm gonna call you. It's not a problem. Okay. Yeah, she's got problems with her audio, so we're just gonna do it this way. Yes, I'm gonna boot her out of here. So here we go. Let's boot her out. Give me a second, guys. I can do this. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to give her a call. I think it's from her end, to be perfectly honest. So I'm just going to call her. So here we go. Yeah. Get everything set on my phone. So that wasn't cool. I don't know what's going on with her end. But we don't care, because we're going to call her. Okay, here we go. Let me call her. Oh, you dirty Diana, you. Okay. There we go. Now we can do this. Let me boost the mic. Be easier this way. Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It was worth a try. You hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me get you hooked up here. All right. You've been on the show before, and people loved listening to what you had, the stories you had about the BTK Killer, when you were on. So tell me about you for the people that haven't heard about you before.
All right. I'm a professor of forensic psychology and a writer. I just published my 69th book, which is a novel about a forensic psychologist who runs a PI investigation agency, taking on paranormal cases sometimes. And I've written a lot of books about forensics, extreme offenders. I wrote Anne Rice's biography, Dean Kuntz's biography. So I've written about vampires, ghosts, cemeteries, all kinds of things like that. That's who I am.
Fantastic. Now, let me ask you this: is it hard to do research on these killers, like the BTK Killer, or is it easier because I'm talking about like copyrights and stuff like that because they're in jail?
I don't. Well, they're in jail, but there's a lot of information you can find just doing research in their hometown, talking to people who knew them, talking to them. But there's no copyright on it. If they want to talk to you, and they sign over their rights for you to use their material, there's no problem with that. But so the hard part is sometimes they want a cut of, if you make money, they want something. But with Rader, his stuff actually had been signed over to the victims' families.
Okay.
So whatever the book made, that it did not go to him in any way, shape, or form. It went to the victims' families.
Okay. Yeah, I've always wondered how that worked because I always had a couple that I always wanted to write on, but you never know. I may get to it someday. So how are you?
Well, it's different for each one, and it's different prisons have different rules and regulations. So you just have to figure out, where are they? What kinds of things would the prison require? What kinds of things are already out there to know? And then what do you want to know? And is this person willing to talk to you?
Okay. Do you ever get spooked out though when you're writing this stuff? When you start doing research into like the police files and all that on these guys, is there ever a time when you're sitting there at night and you're starting to look over your shoulder because you see the stuff that they did?
Well, I'm cautious. I don't take unnecessary risks, but it doesn't really get to me at all. I sleep well. I don't feel like somebody's stalking me or anything like that. So no, not really.
Okay, I just find it interesting because I know when I used to cover some of these cases, I was kind of like that too, but it made me more leery when I was out on my own. When you're out running around alone, because it kind of opens your eyes to stuff that people don't realize how happens to happens to other people and things like that.
Yeah, I know, but I think if you're going to undertake this kind of work, you have to already be a certain type of person. So you're not naturally fearful. You tend to be bold and confident, and so it probably wouldn't bother you as much.
Right.
But yeah, so it doesn't, and it's clinical for me. It's really my work, and I've been doing it for about 25 years.
Right.
So it doesn't really get to me.
Right. Understood. Now you wrote a book on cemeteries, and it was a very fascinating book. And you not only wrote about cemeteries, and part of that book, there was something in there about like the cemeteries in Paris. And I remember landing when we came in on the airplane. And that's the first thing you see as you go down to the airport are the cemeteries. There's just so many cemeteries in Paris.
Yes, since I wrote the book Cemetery Stories, I actually went to Paris for about maybe 10 days, and really was mostly to go from one cemetery to another, because there are such amazing cemeteries. There's so much artwork in these cemeteries, and each one is distinct. Like Montmartre, very crowded, but they have amazing sculptures. Père Lachaise, again, really unique. Same thing with Rome. They have some very unique cemeteries as well. So since I wrote that book, I've actually gone around to even more cemeteries, picking up stories and getting a sense of them. And then even the novel I just published a couple of days ago has cemetery scenes.
Nice.
So I guess I can't stop doing cemeteries.
Well, I was kind of like that when I was first taking photography, and everything we were shooting was supposed to be in black and white. And I started because being ghost hunting and everything. I was hanging out in Victorian Cemetery because we have a Victorian cemetery here in town, and I started to notice the tombstones, and I never realized that they would make custom tombstones according to what the person did for a living or whatever their hobby was.
Well, and I just saw that in Scotland. I was in Edinburgh for about 5 days, and all the cemeteries, everybody on their tombstones had their whatever they had done for a living, like a letter carrier or grocer or something. That's very interesting because you don't normally see that, but it was every single person had something etched on their stone about their occupation.
I'll have to get to Scotland to look, because what I did, I was finding stuff here, like if the guy was a lumberjack, right? They would have like a wood made out of cement with a saw in it.
Huh.
It was really cool. So I did a whole expose on this for my class because at the end of the class you're supposed to do like a like those. Oh, here I am, a newspaper person. I can't remember. Like those newspaper pages where you have like all these different photos, like from the fair, sights and sounds of the fair. And so that's what we were supposed to do. So I decided to do it on the cemetery yards. And so I drove to all these cemeteries locally and then out of town, and I was finding stuff like that. And I was finding things like a guy was like on the railroad, so they had a train on top of his tombstone. That was in cement. It was really cool.
That is cool.
And I would love to do what you did and go and go to New Orleans and look at these things like you say in Scotland and France, just to see what these what's on these tombstones.
Yeah, I've basically done 100 cemeteries to see before you die, kind of idea, because I have traveled a lot of places where I've heard about either a unique cemetery or a unique monument or tomb or something. And I've gone just to see it, just to experience, different cultures. And like in the Caribbean, for example, there were some real differences there from one island to another in terms of the culture and the kinds of things they wanted to do. Mexico was really unusual for the Day of the Dead ceremonies. Wonderful parties all night long in the cemeteries.
When you talk about let's look at the Caribbean. When you talk about the different cultures, what are you talking about as far as the cemeteries?
Well, in the Caribbean, like one island was half Dutch and half something else. I can't remember what the other country was that owned it, but so each side of that island had its own practices, its own way of doing of burials and the kinds of tombstones they might have, and it was maybe embalming and on one side and no embalming on the other. So it was just interesting that an island had two different ways of doing their death rituals.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I know that one cemetery we have over here, there's a section for the, I believe it's Ukrainians. And so there is a difference where the Catholic cemetery, all the tombstones are flat. There's no
right.
There's none of that. And then when you look at the other cemetery, all the tombstones are upright. So it's interesting.
But we have one here. It's called God's Acre, and it's a Moravian cemetery, and it's a religion that's kind of like Lutheran. They settled the Bethlehem area, and so for this one area, it's all flat because their idea was that everybody should be equal, and so nobody was going to get anything special in death, and so everybody got the same kind of stone, except for one person, and it was a woman. And she had done something special, so she got a more special stone. But they had Native American burials in the cemetery. They had, male and female. They had different ethnicities, but everybody got exactly the same type of stone because the idea was that they were not going to be elevated in any way in death.
Interesting. See, I find this, like I said, I'm kind of like you. I would like to tour. if I could tour like a bunch of cemeteries, I'd be really happy doing it.
Yeah.
Cause I like to see the different
Well,
stuff.
I think whenever you do travel, just find the cemetery that's around. I always do that. Sometimes it's, it's nothing special, but quite often I'll find something really interesting or unusual.
Mm-hmm. Now, I had the opportunity as a reporter to hang out for a day with a mortuary.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see how they operate. In fact, not only did I hang out, I actually got to see a body cremated.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty weird.
It's an experience, the way they do that. It's not how people expect it to be.
Right. Or what comes out is not what people expect it to be.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a friend who had, when he wanted to be, he knew he was dying, so he had this will where he wanted to be cremated, but then he wanted his cremains put into a box and taken to his favorite restaurant and be the centerpiece of our dinner. And so the steak dinners were on him all around, but the requirement was that his cremains would be put right in the middle of the table.
Oh, wow. That way he could take part too.
Yep.
That's
so we did it.
It's not funny, but it is in a way, the last laugh. Just like these people.
That was the first time I think I'd seen cremains and realized that they weren't the way they're kind of presented on TV.
Right. Just like these people nowadays that want to be buried with cell phones and stuff, and it's just weird because people will be standing over the graves and then the cell phone starts to ring. Creepy.
Right.
Or a voice comes out.
If you're scared you're going to be buried alive, it's a good idea to have a cell phone.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, in your travels with these, these different cemeteries, talking with mortuaries and stuff. Did anybody have any stories about like the real old stuff as far as like bells inside the graves themselves to alert them?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was in Savannah. We went to Bonaventure Cemetery, and there were some stories there about people who had made special provisions just in case they were buried alive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually from the 19th century, like Poe, his sort of era. He wrote some stories about that practice, and there were people who were buried alive. So that's how that got started. There were people who'd wake up inside a mausoleum or something. If they were buried alive in the ground, then they probably didn't get out. But the practice of selling these things to them, these air tubes or mechanisms, where if they found themselves waking up in their coffin, they could ring a bell, somebody up, and presumably somebody walking by would hear it and dig them up. But I don't know if I could handle waiting around for someone to dig me up. I think I have claustrophobia. I think that would drive me crazy.
It would drive me crazy too. And then the other types of graves too that people see all the time, see in the old cemeteries where they've got the steel bars across the top and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's for the body snatchers.
Yep.
And in fact, when I was in Scotland, my hotel was right across from where Burke and Hare, the famous body snatchers, had picked up their victims. And they actually inspired some of these frames that go over the coffins to keep people from digging up their loved ones, because people would dig up the freshly dead to sell to the medical schools because they could pick up a lot of money doing that. And the only thing that was against the law was taking their items. So they would dig the bodies, strip off the clothing, dump the clothing back in the grave, and take off with the bodies. And so having these coffin safes, mort safes they were called, made it more difficult to dig up, because people didn't want to camp. Sometimes they would hire someone to camp out over the graves for 3 or 4 days until the decomposition made the body not very workable. But then those people could be bribed. So the mort safes were an extra layer of protection.
That's what I mean. People don't realize the history on graves and stuff. I mean, all they see is probably their loved one being buried. The tombstone goes in. They don't realize that there's like this real culture and history that's connected to them. Just like with trying to prevent vampires.
Right.
in some of those places.
They realize it if they're in that culture because they're afraid for their loved ones, and they go to, some strenuous effort making sure they're protected if they can. And they, of course, don't want to, end up waking up as a vampire either.
That's true. That's true. Now, wasn't there a practice for a while there, about being buried face down, that some people were buried face down?
Well, we know that Jesse James was buried face down because when I was on an exhumation team, and the person who ran the team, Jim Stars, wanted to find out if Jesse James was in his grave, because there were all these stories from people who claimed that he had escaped, he had faked his death, he had gone on to father, have children and grandchildren, and many people claimed to have been the descendants of Jesse James who got away. And so we were going to exhume the body, which had been exhumed before, to move it to the James farm. And when they dug it up, they realized that the way the bones were laid out, he had been buried face down, facing hell, basically.
Okay. Because I was wondering about that. Why would you bury somebody face down?
Well, there was another story that a funeral director told me about how this woman, after they had the funeral, she paid him to turn her husband's body over and to have it face down, because I guess the suit that they had put on him it was open in the back, and she wanted his butt exposed because she was angry at him over something. So that was a reason to bury him face down, for humiliation. But is the idea that when you're facing into the earth, you're facing hell.
Okay.
That's where you're going to go. You're not going up to heaven.
That's different. I didn't realize that. That's really cool. I mean, that's what I'm saying. People don't realize that there's this subculture that goes on with this stuff. There's legends.
Oh yeah, and that was what the fun was, is meeting all these funeral directors. When I went to it was this thing in Baltimore where all the funeral directors were converging for a conference. And they were displaying all the different types of caskets and the cremains, the things you can do with cremains, and so there are all kinds of exhibits. And then they would hang out at the bar and tell stories. So it was really an amazing thing for me to be able to have been invited to something like that, to be able to overhear the stories. And there were characters. I met one freelance embalmer who just loved going from place to place, embalming people, for a fee. He wasn't a funeral director, wasn't attached to any particular funeral home. He just enjoyed putting makeup on the dead. And he was quite good at it, so people wanted him, and he made quite a good living just going from one place to another.
Now, when we talk about creative things to do with cremains, I know because I follow TikTok a lot, and I know that they can actually make diamonds out of somebody's cremains.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things. One person who had been a musician, they took parts of his cremains and made it into, like, they had a picture of a treble, like I don't know what music, all the stuff music is called, but when you see pictures of music with the notes and stuff, and so the cremains made the little fat part of the notes, and so it was like a musical melody kind of thing that they use as cremains to decorate it.
Oh, cool.
Some people are crushed into diamonds. That's a pretty expensive process. There were several others. One guy, I remember, this is at this funeral directors convention. They were trying to talk people into buying the idea that they'd make a picture, and the cremains would be put into the paint and painted into this picture. And this guy says, "There's no way, because I'll end up on a garage sale somewhere."
That's funny.
So yeah, they can be very creative these days with what they do, and also a lot of people are not opting for traditional ceremonies. They want really elaborate coffins with all kinds of paintings and pictures on it. Or one guy wanted his cremains to be shot into space. They might take him fishing. depending on what they loved in life, they're asking funeral directors to accommodate, whatever it is that they cared about, rather than just this solemn traditional ceremony. More people are opting for something really creative that is expressive of who they were.
That was the other thing I was going to talk to you about. There's I don't know if they do it here, but I know there's mortuaries over in Puerto Rico and places like that where they actually display the bodies in whatever they enjoyed doing.
Yeah, and Puerto Rico has amazing cemeteries, unbelievable ones. They were really quite beautiful, very elaborate.
Because I've seen these things where these guys are even like there's a guy on a motorcycle.
Yeah, I think I saw that. There was another guy who was buried in his BMW or some beloved car or something like that.
Can you imagine going into a way, going over the mortuary, and then you see your loved one in front of the TV with the remote control.
Yeah,
and he's just sitting there watching TV. There's all kinds of stuff they do.
People do all kinds of things. One person had his spouse embalmed and put into a glass table so he could look at her.
That's funny.
There are all kinds of weird things that surround death rituals and people's inability to let go.
Now, when you went to this convention, I'm sure you saw some of the equipment that they use or some of the stuff. And I know that, there's stuff, like I said, there's stuff people don't realize even goes on. Because, like I said, I spent time, like the eye caps.
Yes, the eye caps for the eyes so they don't just sink in.
Right.
Yeah, that's for having the wake. So when people come and look at the body, they put the eye caps under, and then glue the eyes shut over the eye caps so that they look natural. Same thing. There's also something they put in the mouth. There's kind of a mouth guard as well, because they have to sew the mouth shut, otherwise it would gape open. So yeah, these people who do the makeup on the dead have to be very creative, because some people have been shot in the face, for example, or in some kind of car accident, and they're all misshapen. So the makeup artists for the dead are really quite talented, and they come up with some interesting things. Also, I think cotton. They put cotton in the mouth to fill out the cheeks. Was another one that I saw. There's all kinds of things they told me. It was really, really fun talking to the makeup artists.
It is fun talking, and they have a weird sense of humor, don't they?
Yes, they do. They have
to look at that every day. I mean, it's a great career if you're into that sort of thing.
Well, but they're also trying to make it as positive of an experience as possible for the people who are coming in and they're grieving. So in a way, they're trying to be almost like therapists. They're trying to restore the person as much as they possibly can so that the grieving process has some kind of completion or closure. And so, they have a lot of compassion. Typically, they might have a sense of humor, but they also have a lot of compassion, because they're trying to really give the people the best experience possible under the circumstances.
Absolutely. Now, you also checked out Jim Morrison's grave, right?
Well, what a disappointing place that was. Yes, I went to Père Lachaise, and even now it's very hard to get close to the grave because they put a fence up around it. Because so many people were coming in and defacing it and leaving all kinds of trash and litter there. But yeah, so the whole Jim Morrison story is very interesting, because there are people who think that he faked his death and that he's still around. And usually in Père Lachaise, you can buy a 30-year lease. So at the 30-year mark, there were people waiting for that grave to be opened and those remains to be removed. But it turned out his girlfriend or wife, whoever it was, had purchased long-term. So the 30-year lease didn't yield any surprises. But his grave it's in Père Lachaise, which is this incredible, just visually beautiful cemetery with monuments everywhere that they're just spectacular. And his is just this flat, boring little grave that with a little stone that just so disappointing, in my opinion, to go there. And lots of people leaving just crap on it. It's yeah.
I've toured Hollywood forever down down south. It's interesting. When you go to those places, it finally hits you. If you're one of these people that's like, woo, 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 I love life, you finally get to this place and you realize that even these movie stars couldn't avoid it.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you, kind of gives you a weird feeling because you realize that not everybody's going to live forever.
Right.
And
that, no matter how much money or fame or beauty or anything they have, it's like the Moravian cemetery. You're all the same in depth.
Yeah, we're all going to end up the same, And like you say, Jim Morrison's thing was disappointing because, like, if you go to some place like Hollywood Forever, they're all custom done, but there are areas even in Hollywood Forever where they're just flat tombstone, flat stones in the ground too, because that's what they wanted. It just depends.
Well, the weird thing about Morrison, though, is that he overdosed there in Paris, and but there was a story that he had read. I think it was the week before that somebody had faked his death and filled his coffin with stuff to make it feel as if someone was in there. And when his bandmates actually got there, they had already sealed the coffin. And so these guys didn't see Jim Morrison's body.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they were asking, who's the guy who signed the death certificate, she couldn't remember and she couldn't find the guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it really did become suspicious that maybe he hadn't died and he had done what he had just read about in the newspaper. He had faked it too, because nobody saw the body.
Wow.
So maybe he is around.
Yeah, maybe he is, huh? Just like Elvis is around too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, he really got tired of celebrity and wanted to come back as someone else and just, so it's possible.
Yeah.
He did talk about it after he saw that article in the Paris newspaper, and there it was. He died very quickly thereafter.
Well, you never know. These guys had enough money to do that stuff, So anything is possible.
And then I think she died too pretty quickly. I think when she went back to California, she died in an accident of some kind as well. So the secrets went with her if there were any to be had.
Right. So tell me about haunted cemeteries. You did that too, didn't you?
Well, a lot of cemeteries have strange stories.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're haunted, maybe they're not. But there were a few that were very interesting. I explored some when I was running around with ghost hunters and testing equipment and whatnot. I did get voices on recorders when I was in cemeteries in some places. One of the most famous cemeteries for that is Highgate in London.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the neighborhood of London, and supposedly there's a vampire that skulks around there, and it is one creepy cemetery. It's beautiful, but definitely really creepy. So stories crop up around Highgate that there are all kinds of spooky things there. I think you'd probably find ghost stories in almost any cemetery that you went to because it's the dead.
Right. But you don't find with vampire stories. You don't find a lot of those.
No, you don't.
Unless you're in New Orleans or something, on the East Coast or someplace. And nothing like I don't think there's anything like that out here.
Yeah, there used to be this guy named David Farrant who'd go into you're not supposed to go in that cemetery at night. He'd go in there at night looking for the vampire, and he'd get arrested, and it was just a little crazy. But yeah, I think you can find ghost stories and associated with at least most elaborate cemeteries like that.
Mm-hmm.
There was one cemetery that figured into an interesting serial killer case, and it was also in London. What happened is that 3 young men were found dead. 2 of them were propped up 3 weeks apart in the same place, propped up against the inside wall, and the other one was on the outside wall of the same cemetery. And one of them had a suicide note in his hand that said that he was so distraught over having accidentally caused the guy the 3 weeks before him to have died from an overdose, a drug overdose, that he wanted to kill himself the same way. And so the police closed those cases as a accidental death and a suicide. And the other one they just wrote off as an accidental overdose. And it turned out it was a serial killer who had killed all of them, wrote the suicide note to stage the suicide, and the police missed the whole thing because they just bought into the story of these guys are just drug addicts, and they weren't. But the serial killer killed all of them by injecting them with drugs and then dumped them in that particular cemetery.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yep. His name is Stephen Port.
I'll have to look that one up. That's pretty cool.
It's a good story. And in fact, the police have been thoroughly chastised and the families are suing, and as they should be. There's 4 victims, and all of them were around that cemetery area.
Well, that's pretty cool. I was thinking about the grave robber, stuff on there, those bars they put over the graves, kind of goes back, and then you talking about this guy too, it kind of goes back to Eddie Gein, where maybe that's what they should have had that cemetery where he was at. Whoa, Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, he and that's what led him to become a murderer, is he and a buddy went and dug up these bodies, but the skin wasn't what he was looking for. Was really pliable, supple skin, and the dead didn't have that. Mm-hmm. So he figured maybe it's better just to kill some. Mm-hmm. He wanted women of a particular size, or about the right size of his mother. And so when the dead didn't yield the kind of skin he was looking for, he then started killing women. Mm-hmm. And he was psychotic. He didn't really know particularly what he was doing. So, but he was a grave robber, and then he became a serial killer.
And what people don't realize is when you watch The Silence of the Lambs, that is based on him.
Well, it's based on several. Okay. Buffalo Bill is actually a serial killer who was killing up in, he was Rochester, New York. That was his name. Gein was the model for the skin thing, mm-hmm. but putting them in the pit was a serial killer out of Philadelphia. So it was a mix of 3 or 4 serial killers for Silence of the Lambs.
Interesting. When we talk about Gein now, the other thing too is that, I mean, he had a mother fetish, but yet his mother was cruel to him.
Yeah, but he was also isolated. He had a low IQ. He had a mental disturbance. He had no way of knowing really any better. Mm-hmm. We don't know how his brother died, but it's possible he killed his brother mm-hmm. to have his mother all to himself. It's not surprising at all when kids grow up with cruel parents that they still adhere to those parents. They don't want to be taken away from them. We find that a lot.
I just find his story so fascinating.
And I don't know that it was really a mother fetish so much as it was he wanted to be a female.
Yeah, that's that too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So maybe that came from a reliance on his mother, and maybe it's simply he just felt more like a female and he wanted to transform into one.
But he had other things going on too. I mean, he was like making skull bowls and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just actually in a museum that had all of his records, all of the psychiatric records, the polygraph, some pieces of skin that he had made. One was a keychain made out of human hair. It was very interesting.
Yeah, because he was making lamps.
Yeah.
Out of human skin.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. Because didn't the police find all those magazines that would show him how to do that?
Well, there were magazines where you could send away for shrunken heads and things. They were
taxidermy. Whoa.
Yeah, it's almost like the Craigslist today. You can find anything you want. The Reddit of Craigslist, I guess.
Yeah, he was just the weirdo in town. That's all they thought of him was a weirdo in town. Boy, was he weird.
Well, he was a strange little guy who was of limited intelligence and few skills, and he's just one of the weirdos, basically.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yep.
So let's talk about these body ranches, you know, where they do experiments on the bodies, where they leave them outside.
Oh, the body farms.
Yeah, the body farm. Sorry, ranches.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the body farms are science. The first one started in Tennessee, University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and they had about 2.5 acres outside the university, and they would lay out bodies in all different kinds of dispositions, like buried or on the ground, in sun, in shade, in water, locked in the trunk of a car, in a house, all different kinds of dispositions, so that they could study what's a concept called time since death. So how long, if somebody were laid out, how could we measure the changes so that we can establish when somebody's found in the woods, for example, we can establish, well, how long have they been there based on scientific calculations. So that body farm then inspired a few others, because what you need is different environments and different soil types. So there's one also in Texas, there's one in Pennsylvania, there's one in, I believe it's North Carolina. I think there's about 6 of them now.
So when you donate your body to science, you don't really know if it's going directly to a body farm, or if it's going to
you do know, because when you donate your body to science, you typically stipulate where you want it to go.
Okay.
In fact, the body farm has a long list of people who want to be there.
Wow.
They want to donate their bodies specifically to the body farm, and they have a list of things that they want, like middle-aged women. Then they don't get many volunteers like that, so they have their wish list. But there are a lot of people who wanted to just be used for science. There's a couple of pretty good specials on National Geographic Channel of work at the body farm, and one is called and I think it's called Biography of a Corpse, where they did high-speed camera work to show the body decomposing and the maggots coming in and defleshing it, and then it gets skeletonized, and it's all done in very quick time, but you see all the different stages. And different graduate students will take on different types of projects. Like when I went there, I spent about a week there one year in August in Tennessee. Was not a pleasant time at all for being around decomposing bodies out in the open. But there were a couple of graduate students from New Zealand who had put a body, sealed it into a big 30-gallon kind of thing, and they sealed it there so no bugs could get to it, no air, no nothing. And they were about to unveil it to look inside and see what the body would look like if there had not been any bug activity. It was pretty rank. Let me just tell you, it stank. It stank, and it was just like a liquid puddle with some bones sticking out. It was really kind of horrible. But it's science. They were studying, in case somebody sealed a body into a container like that, what would we expect it to look like over different stages of time?
Well, yeah, and that helps the police too when they go on an investigation or they have a body call.
Yeah, and it helps break alibis. If somebody said, "Oh, I wasn't here then," you now have a timeline, scientifically based timeline. But the thing is, we need to have it in different environments. It's called taphonomy, or laws of the grave. That's the science. And you need to have bodies that have been in the desert and mummified, that have been in, the low country with swamps, that have been in a place like Minnesota or Canada. So they need more of these kinds of facilities in order to really establish all different kinds of circumstances and conditions.
So that's another thing I find interesting. I find all this interesting, obviously. What about New Orleans?
Yeah, I was really privileged to be able to spend the time at one. The public doesn't just get in
for
no reason. but they had just opened up a class, and for some reason allowed me to come, and so that really put me right up front to see how it all was laid out, and bodies in all different stages of decomposition. They had one that was a Native American burial in the air, and so it was up high, and the pieces were falling down from this thing. They had another that was a bird thing. What would the birds do to the body?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the one in Texas, they've done some experiments with vultures, because they had in the past had estimated how long it would take a vulture to get rid of the human remains, and they were completely wrong on their estimates. The vultures worked much faster than they had anticipated. So you have to study these things. I mean, that's part of it is we have ideas about what could happen, but until we really have these good, solid scientific ways to measure it,
mm-hmm.
We can't go into court and testify about any of it.
Right. So when you're walking around these farms, is there a smell?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yep, because they're decomposing in all different kinds of ways. You know, a fresh one that's just laid out, you're still going to get the different biological smells, like urine and feces and such things as that. But then even as they decompose, there's all the bacteria smells, and yeah, it does. It's definitely, you're around the dead.
I remember reading a book by Thomas Noguchi.
Yeah.
And I remember reading.
I've met him several times.
Have you?
Yeah.
I love his book, and it goes into, the different stages of a decomposing body and how they can tell,
right.
Or get an estimate.
So does my book. So does Cemetery Stories.
I saw that. That's why I was just mentioning it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Noguchi is pretty interesting. I used to go to this conference, the American Academy of Forensic Science, and it seemed like he was always the very first person I saw, year after year. And then he stopped going to that. I'm not sure even if he's still alive, but very, very. He wrote several books about the different autopsies he had done.
Absolutely. Well, for the sake of the audience, since I've read your book and maybe they haven't, what are the stages of decomposition for a body? Because I don't think people realize that there's there's like 2 or 3 stages of rigor, right? I think I saw 2.
Well, it's been 20 years since I wrote that book,
sure.
But I'll try to remember. Again, it's going to be about where the body is left. If the body's inside, that's going to have a very different timeline than if it's left out in the woods. If it's summer, it's going to be different than winter. If it's different conditions are going to have different effects on the timeline. But basically, as the body is decomposing, the bacteria are coming in, and the flies immediately smell that. They're the first thing. So that there's stages of insects that come. The flies lay eggs. They hatch into maggots. The maggots begin eating the flesh, and then wasps come, spiders come. It's really an interesting. You can tell kind of how long a body has been in the woods, for example, by the different bugs that have come and gone.
Right.
And what's still there, how far away are the maggots as they crawl away, what's in their stomach, all of that. Entomology is a fascinating field if you like bugs. But then the body itself begins to go into rigor. So that starts with the small muscles first, then moves through the body, which means it's stiffening. A lot of people think rigor stays, but in fact it doesn't. After a certain period of time, it starts loosening up. The body also bloats because the bacteria is working inside in the intestines and whatnot. The skin is it's what's called skin slippage. It's beginning to come off because after the body is swollen, the swelling goes down, and now you've got the skin that's loose and also has it's lost all its connectedness, and so it's beginning to slip off. The body goes through different colorations as the bacteria are working on it. So on and on and on.
Right.
then eventually it collapses in on itself, and especially if you have a lot of insects working on it, collapses in on itself and begins to either decompose and become a puddle, or in other circumstances it might become more of a mummified kind of thing. Like if you're in the Southwest, it's going to be more, it's going to dry up and then cling to the bones. And then depending on how much longer the body's out there, and the bugs are working on it, it becomes skeletonized.
And then, like you say, it depends on the conditions of the place where the body's at, too. Because, I mean, if it's sitting in 10 days of heat, it's going to decompose faster.
Much faster, yep. And some soils will decompose it faster than others. So depending on if somebody has buried a body, there are times that could be preservative rather than corrosive. So that also has an effect on how fast something decomposes, and also whether they're wearing a lot of clothing or not.
So now on a lighter note, well, not on a lighter note, but what cemeteries in the United States have impressed you?
I love the garden cemeteries. There's one in Boston, one in Philadelphia, one in Brooklyn, one in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And these are cemeteries that were intended to be places of, there's actually one near me in Easton, Pennsylvania. They're intended to be places of recreation, picnics, social gatherings, with beautiful monuments. So there's a sense of artwork, beautiful plants and well-kept trees, and, just wonderful places to be. And there was supposed to have been kind of a movement of garden cemeteries, but they really only got so far before, and they're very expensive. So you find them here and there, and when you do, you should go in and see them because they are spectacular. But so I think those are my favorites. And also I love the ones I was just in Savannah. The ones in New Orleans are also quite amazing because they're the above ground tombs, and there's a lot of history to those cemeteries. So, and there's one outside of San Francisco that it's like a whole row. I mean, just long miles of graves. Do you know which I'm talking about? It's I can't think of the name of it. When they began to move all the dead out of San Francisco, because they just didn't have room anymore, and they put them all in this. It's like a town that's all cemetery.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
It is in the book, but I can't think of where it is. But that was pretty impressive.
I remember seeing the name of it in the book. My mind's been like Jello this last week. It just I go crazy. We have one in Sacramento. We actually have one here. It's a Victorian cemetery.
Okay.
And when spring comes, it's the most beautiful place to be.
Yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Because, back in the old days, people didn't look at cemeteries the way we all look at cemeteries now.
Right.
People people picnicked in these cemeteries.
Yes, and that's what the garden cemeteries were all about, is recreation, social gatherings, picnics. They used to, and now we're scared of cemeteries.
Yeah.
Unless you go to Mexico, and then they party in their cemeteries.
Yeah. Because
let me see if I can find out the name.
There's a big fountain there's a big fountain in the middle of the one I have here, that we have here. So you could go sit around the fountain, and have lunch or whatever. But it's beautiful to be walking around in there.
All right, I know what it is. I just looked up cemetery town. It's called Colma, Colma, California. It's a small incorporated town that is just nothing but cemeteries.
Awesome.
It's outside San Francisco.
I've always wanted to go there. Now I know what you're talking about. I always wanted to go there.
Yeah.
Impressive. If you guys haven't read this book that she wrote, you should, because I absolutely enjoyed it immensely. But I'm into that sort of thing. I mean, not everybody's into that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I absolutely enjoyed it.
Thank you. I had a good time writing it, running around and finding all these places.
I'm hooked on all your books because they're so well written.
Well, thank you. Well, you might like the new novel because it has a cemetery in it.
Absolutely.
And crucial scenes happen in the cemetery.
Really?
Yeah. And it's a low country in South Carolina. It's a low country cemetery, so swampy and all that. And there's a hurricane on top of that.
You just piled it on, didn't you, on this one? We're just gonna throw all this at the reader and just nail them.
It's called Ice Cream Man, like Ice Cream Man.
Okay, cool.
And it is got a lot of action in it, but certainly cemeteries.
Absolutely. What have you found, in your career doing this stuff and writing these books and teaching and everything? What have you found to be the most satisfying?
Writing.
Okay.
Writing, traveling for writing, research for writing, then writing some more.
I would think that's fun. I mean, as a newspaper reporter, I love going on location. I don't like being stuck behind a phone interviewing people. I would rather be on location, physically seeing what I'm writing about because it's fun. Meeting the people and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I love seeing new things, learning new things, finding new cemeteries, meeting characters. It's fun. I've been doing it for probably 35 years. I love it.
What is your most out of all your books? I know most people will say what's the current one I've written, but out of all the books you've written, which one is your favorite?
Well, favorite in terms of, for context, I definitely loved all the travel I did for the companion guides to Anne Rice's, which is in Vampire Worlds, because I got to go to many amazing places to write those encyclopedias. But I also I put a lot of effort into the BTK book, and I'd have to say that's probably the one that most showcases all of the skills and awareness and knowledge that I have about serial killers. But the novel that I just wrote, which I hope will become a series, is something I'm totally in love with because I really love my characters. So yeah, that's probably what I'd have to say.
What's next for you?
The next novel in the series and one more serial killer book. Because I am going to retire soon and just write.
That would work. That sounds good to me. How can people find you?
I'm mostly on Facebook. I do a lot of interactions on Facebook, and so I would say that's the easiest way. I do have a website, but it leads right to I set it up for the novel series. It's not really about me. It's about the novels. So I would say find me on Facebook. All
right, cool. Well, thank you for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me.
And we'd love to get you back on again and talk about your other book, We'll just keep you rolling on here. All right. Katherine, thank you so much. And have a great evening, okay?
Okay, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, that was Katherine Ramsland. And I learned a lot. I read her book. The cemetery book just kept me glued. But I'm into that sort of thing, I'm a ghost hunter. I told you I even had notes tonight to talk to her about. I never take notes on books. I took notes on her book. But, yeah, I mean, that stuff fascinates me anyway. I was a court crime reporter for 5 years, and I used to go out to, the murder scenes and all this other stuff. And then, yeah, it's just right up my alley. Anyway, guys, I want to thank Katherine again if she's listening. Thank you, Katherine. And I'll have some contact information for her after the show. As we finish tomorrow, David Brody is going to be with us, our old friend. He was on way back in April, and he's got a book out about. We're going to learn about Templars. And we're going to learn about Lilith, right? Lilith, the legend of Lilith. So we're going to be talking to David Brody about that tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. All right, so I'll be here. I had made other arrangements for stuff tomorrow, but I decided to do a special show with David, so I'm real excited to talk with him. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. If you like the show and you're watching from Facebook, please hit that follow button. If you're watching from YouTube, please click on that little ghost down there with the magnifying glass, the Sherlock Holmes hat, and that'll subscribe you to our shows and subscribe you to our page because we have a lot. Check us out at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com or CaliforniaHaunts.org. The .org page is kind of iffy because I'm actually designing a whole new page for California for the paranormal group itself. So That's going to be neat. That's going to be really interactive. So I'm going to be working. In fact, this weekend I have meetings with team members to talk about this and talk about how we're going to make it more interactive and stuff. So it's going to be kind of cool when I get done. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio, right? I always say that every show. But we're trying to get the word out. The more we can get the word out, the more people listen. And, like I said, our numbers have been going up, and we want to keep it going. We want to keep that going, okay? You see that ticker down at the bottom? That is because we are technically a nonprofit, even though we don't operate as a nonprofit, but we don't charge to go out on investigations. We just don't. We just, we're out to help people. That's our goal, help and educate people. So if something goes wrong with a piece of equipment, or if one of these computers break for the show, or, stuff like that, plus I have internet costs and all that stuff that I have to pay for every month, just like you have bills every month, I have bills to maintain the show every month. And I want to keep this show coming. We're about to start our 3rd season next week. That's pretty cool, right? 3 seasons. And I didn't think I'd be on this long, but here we are. So if you could help me out with that, I'd appreciate it. That's at paypal.me/California Haunts. Or you can, if you're uncomfortable with PayPal, Venmo, and then just type in California Haunts. All right? Well, anyway, I'm going to share her contact information and where you can get her books, because she has a lot of books. So check this out. Here we go. Okay, The Mind of a Murderer and Ghost. Confession of a Serial Killer. The Untold Story of Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer, and Inside the Minds of Serial Killers. And you can get those books at Amazon. And again, if you want to find Katherine Ramsland, check out Facebook, because she's there. Okay? Anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a good evening. Later.